Imagine dedicating your life to a discovery no one believes in, until the world needs it most. This isn't a story about luck, it's a story about courage, grit, and stubborn science. Katalin Karikó saw potential in messenger RNA, mRNA, when almost everyone else rolled their eyes or shut their doors. She lost jobs, funding dried up, and powerful voices told her to move on. But she wouldn't let go. Through the cold corridors of academia and the frustrations of bureaucracy, Karikó carried her research across borders and through setbacks. Then, the world changed. A pandemic struck. Traditional science wasn't fast enough. Suddenly Karikó's once dismissed idea became the heart of a life-saving vaccine. In record time, mRNAVaccines were developed, and millions of lives were saved. This isn't just about vaccines, it's about perseverance, it's about believing in ideas ahead of their time, and it's about justice that sometimes comes late, but still changes everything. If you think science deserves patience and respect, hit subscribe and tell us what you think in the comments. Because today's ignored idea might be tomorrow's salvation.
Welcome to For Science Salah Lotfy channel, where global scientific research becomes clear and accessible.
هنا نحول الأبحاث العلمية العالمية إلى معرفة مبسطة مترجمة لك بلغتك.
Ici, la science est expliquée et traduite pour tous.
Ciencia clara, accesible y disponible en varios idiomas.
Wissenschaft, verständlich und mehrsprachig für jeden.
قناة For Science Salah Lotfy channel. العلم للجميع وبجميع اللغات. تابعنا لاكتشاف المزيد.
Have you ever wondered if the science that changed your life almost never happened, just because it wasn't cool enough? Seriously, think about that for a second. Some of the biggest breakthroughs didn't start out as headlines. They began as ideas people didn't even want to fund. I'll tell you why that matters. In today's research world, there's this subtle, unspoken force at work: trendiness. If your research isn't on the current hot topic, you're less likely to get grants, less likely to get published, and way less likely to get noticed. But you know what? That pressure to fit in can strangle real discovery. Let me ask you, have you ever thought about changing your field or even giving up on your own ideas just because they weren't popular? If you have, you're not alone. That feeling isn't some personal shortcoming, it's baked into the system. But here's the amazing part. History is filled with scientists who kept going, even when the world told them to stop. Take Professor Meher Al-Qadi. As a grad student, he hacked together a way to make laser-scribed graphene using a DVD burner. Nobody cared, at first. His unfashionable experiment, it became the foundation for flexible, safe, even fire-resistant batteries. He's now powering everything from medical implants to electric cars, and he just got recognized as one of the top inventors in the world. Or look at Dr. Dennis Slamon. Back in the 80s, he was obsessed with a gene called HER2, not a trendy topic. He was told he was wasting his time, but he stuck to his guns, and his work led to Herceptin, a drug that's now saved millions of lives from breast cancer. See the pattern? The science done at the margins, the stuff nobody wanted to touch, ended up changing the world. It's not luck. It's persistence. It's the courage to keep asking questions that nobody else is asking. So, next time you hear about a strange, unfashionable idea, don't roll your eyes. Remember, the ideas that don't fit today's trends might just be what the world relies on tomorrow. And if you're working on something that feels overlooked, keep going. The world needs thinkers who don't just follow the crowd, but lead it somewhere new. Thanks for tuning in. If you're passionate about science beyond trends, you're in the right place. Every great scientific breakthrough has a beginning, and very often that beginning is far removed from privilege, comfort, or opportunity. If we trace the origins of transformative science, we rarely find luxury laboratories or ideal conditions. Instead, we find constraint, pressure, and environments that seem, at first glance, completely hostile to intellectual growth. This is where our story truly begins, not in a modern research center, not in a well-funded institution, but in Eastern Europe, in the middle of the Cold War. In 1955, in communist Hungary, Katalin Karikó was born into a modest family living under political control and economic hardship. Her childhood home had no running water, no refrigerator, and no television, conditions that many would associate with limitation rather than possibility. Yet history repeatedly teaches us an important lesson. Difficult environments do not produce weak scientists, they often produce resilient ones. Katalin's father was, well, a simple man by profession, but honestly, a revolutionary in conviction. His political stance came at a high personal cost under the communist regime, a price that, the entire family would inevitably share. Growing up in this atmosphere meant learning, very early, that ideas could be dangerous and that curiosity could carry consequences, and still, Katalin excelled. Despite the absence of resources, despite political tension, and despite social pressure, she demonstrated exceptional talent in science from a young age. During her early education, she distinguished herself academically, earning third place nationwide in biology across Hungary. Which, honestly, is a remarkable achievement in a country where access to opportunity was so tightly controlled. This early success was not an accident, it was really the result of persistence, discipline, and a deep internal belief that knowledge could offer something greater than the circumstances surrounding her. Science for Katalin Karikó was not a career trend, it was actually a form of resistance, a path forward in a system designed to limit movement, intellectual and physical alike. Her story reminds us of a fundamental truth in the history of science. Poverty does not weaken a scientific mind, political pressure does not erase curiosity, and harsh beginnings do not prevent greatness. On the contrary, they often forge scientists who are, relentless, patient, and unwilling to abandon an idea simply because the world is not ready for it yet. And this resilience, shaped in a small home in communist Hungary, would later become the foundation of one of the most important medical breakthroughs of the modern era. But before that breakthrough could change the world, it had to survive a long journey through doubt, rejection, and systems that repeatedly underestimated its value, and that journey is only just beginning. Welcome everyone to Unit 3, Science Under Political Blackmail. You're joining us here on the For Science Salah Lotfy channel. The resilience formed in childhood does not disappear with success. In fact, in many cases, it's tested even more harshly. For Katalin Karikó, academic excellence did not mean safety. In a political system built on surveillance and control, intellectual promise could actually become a liability. As she advanced in her scientific training in communist Hungary, the pressure around her intensified, not because of her work, but because of her family. Her father's political stance had already placed him under scrutiny, and in such systems, the consequences rarely stop with just one person. At a young stage in her academic career, Katalin Karikó was registered as an informant for the Hungarian Communist Secret Police. Not by choice, but under coercion and threat, a form of political blackmail designed to control futures, not protect nations. The message was clear: cooperate, or risk your career. Resist, and risk your family. Later, she would explain that she never provided any information, never acted as an active agent, and never betrayed anyone. But the psychological weight of that pressure was, honestly, very real. This is an uncomfortable chapter in the history of science, and yet, it is not a rare one. Throughout the 20th century, many scientists worked not only under intellectual scrutiny, but under political surveillance. In such environments, science is no longer just about discovery, it becomes a negotiation for survival. This part of the story, as highlighted in the article by Professor Dr. Maher El-Kadi, forces us to confront a difficult truth. Scientific talent does not exist in isolation from power structures. Ideas are shaped, delayed, or sometimes silenced not by their scientific merit, but by the political systems surrounding them. And still, Katalin Karikó persisted. She did not abandon science. She did not abandon her belief in knowledge as a force for progress. Instead, she began to understand a reality many scientists eventually face. If the system you are in cannot protect your ideas, you may have to leave it. This realization would soon lead to one of the most difficult decisions of her life, a decision not driven by ambition, but by necessity. Before we continue this journey, if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, stories where science intersects with ethics, power, and human resilience, take a moment to subscribe to For Science Salah Lotfy channel and join a community that values knowledge beyond trends.
In the Hungary of 1985, the air was thick with more than just the cold of the coming winter. For a young biochemist named Katalin Karikó, it was thick with limitations. She was driven by a powerful idea, a belief in the potential of a molecule called messenger RNA or mRNA. Yet the world around her was a closed system, one where scientific curiosity was often secondary to political loyalty. The government's control reached deep into every corner of life, including the laboratories where the future was supposed to be built. Her research was not just a job, it was her life's calling, a puzzle she felt destined to solve for the betterment of humanity. But in a nation bound by the rigid doctrines of communism, her vision was seen as unconventional and therefore unimportant. The pressure mounted with each passing day. Funding was not awarded based on merit alone, but on connections and conformity. Katalin's focus on mRNA was considered a dead end by many in the scientific establishment, a risky bet in a system that rewarded caution. Her persistence was not celebrated as passion, but viewed with suspicion. Eventually, the inevitable happened. Her research position at the Biological Research Center was eliminated. This was not merely a professional setback, it was a clear message. Her path was blocked, her intellectual freedom extinguished. She and her husband, an engineer, looked at their young daughter and saw a future constrained by the same invisible walls that were closing in on them. They knew they could not stay. Leaving was not a choice born of ambition, but of necessity. It was a desperate act to save a scientific dream and secure a future for their family. To remain in Hungary meant accepting that her groundbreaking ideas would wither on the vine, unpublished and unexplored. It meant watching her daughter grow up in a society where opportunity was rationed and dissent was silenced. The decision to emigrate was a painful one, a tearing away from their roots, their language, and everything they had ever known. They would become strangers in a new land, trading the familiar comforts of home for the terrifying uncertainty of the unknown. The choice was stark, a life of stifled potential, or a leap of faith into a world that might not welcome them. The weight of this decision settled heavily on their shoulders. They were not just leaving a country, they were abandoning their entire lives. Friends and family would be left behind, connections severed by an ideological curtain that was as real as any physical barrier. They would have to learn a new culture, a new language, and a new way of navigating the world, all while carrying the heavy burden of their past. The risks were immense, the chances of failure high. But the risk of staying, of letting a revolutionary scientific concept die and a child's future be limited, was even greater. It was this conviction that fueled their courage and pushed them toward the most daring gamble of their lives. The plan to escape was fraught with peril. Under Hungary's communist regime, citizens were forbidden from taking significant sums of money out of the country. Every possession was scrutinized, every traveler watched. To fund their new beginning, Katalin and her husband sold their car on the black market, a risky transaction that yielded the equivalent of about 900 British pounds. This small fortune was all they had to start over in America. But how could they get it across the border? The answer lay not in a secret compartment or a clever disguise, but in an object of pure innocence, their 2-year-old daughter's teddy bear. It was an ordinary toy, a fluffy companion for a little girl on a long journey. With painstaking care, they sewed the precious banknotes deep inside the bear's stuffing. This simple act transformed the toy into a vessel of immense importance. It was no longer just a comfort object. It was a container for their entire future. The teddy bear carried the sum of their worldly wealth, the seed money for a new life in a land of opportunity. Each stitch was a prayer, a quiet hope that their secret would go undetected by the watchful eyes of the border guards. The risk was enormous. If discovered, they would face severe consequences, their dream of freedom ending before it had even begun. The fate of their family and the future of Katalin's science rested within the fabric and fluff of a child's plaything. As they prepared to cross the border, fear and hope waged a silent war in their hearts. The teddy bear, clutched tightly in their daughter's arms, became a powerful symbol. It represented the clandestine smuggling of more than just cash. Hidden within its seams were years of education, countless hours of research, and a wealth of unpublished ideas that the Hungarian system had rejected. It carried the intellectual capital that Katalin refused to let perish. The bear was smuggling a scientific revolution in miniature, a quiet rebellion against a regime that sought to control not just the movement of people, but the very flow of knowledge itself. It was a testament to their belief that ideas, like people, deserve to be free. Leaving everything behind was a profound sacrifice. They were walking away from their home, their heritage, and the familiar embrace of their community. The journey was a step into a void, filled with the fear of failure and the anxiety of the unknown. What if the money wasn't enough? What if they couldn't find work? What if they were never truly accepted? These questions haunted them, but the hope encapsulated in that teddy bear was stronger. It was the hope of a laboratory where curiosity was encouraged, the hope of a life where their daughter could chase any dream she wished, and the hope that Katalin's lonely scientific quest would one day change the world. Arriving in the United States in 1985 was not a triumphant moment. Katalin Karikó did not land as a celebrated scientist, but as another immigrant with a thick accent and very little money. The family settled in Philadelphia, where she had secured a low-level research position at Temple University. The initial relief of reaching a free country quickly gave way to a new set of harsh realities. The land of opportunity was also a land of intense competition, and she was at a distinct disadvantage. Her visa status was precarious, hanging by the thin thread of her employment. For years she lived with the constant gnawing fear that a single administrative decision or a failed grant proposal could send her and her family back to Hungary. Her early years in American academia were marked by isolation and a profound sense of vulnerability. She was an outsider, a woman from Eastern Europe in a field dominated by established, well-funded men. Her unwavering focus on mRNA was met with the same skepticism she had faced in Hungary, but this time it was cloaked in the language of peer reviews and grant rejections. Colleagues dismissed her research as a fool's errand. She was demoted, her salary was cut, and she bounced from lab to lab, always on the verge of losing her place. The struggle was not just professional, but deeply personal. It was a lonely fight to keep her scientific dream alive against a tide of disbelief. The challenges extended beyond the laboratory walls. Mastering a new language, navigating a foreign culture, and raising a child in an unfamiliar environment demanded immense resilience. The family had to build a life from scratch, with no safety net and no extended family to lean on. Every day was a battle for survival and respect. While America offered intellectual freedom, it did not guarantee success or acceptance. The journey that began with a teddy bear full of cash was far from over. In many ways, the most difficult part had just begun. The political oppression of Hungary had been replaced by the relentless pressures of academic competition and institutional indifference in America. Yet, through it all, Katalin's resolve never wavered. The same courage that led her to flee her homeland now fueled her persistence in the lab. Each rejection only strengthened her determination to prove her doubters wrong. This difficult period of struggle was, in a way, essential for her science. It forced her to be resourceful, to think creatively, and to defend her ideas with unshakable evidence. Her journey illustrates a crucial truth. Migration for a scientist is not simply a quest for better opportunities. It is often a costly, painful, and necessary sacrifice made in the service of an idea that is too important to abandon, no matter the personal cost. For decades, Katalin Karikó toiled in relative obscurity, a prophet of mRNA whose prophecies were largely ignored. Her journey was a marathon of perseverance, a testament to the power of conviction in the face of systemic rejection. The freedom she sought in America allowed her to continue her work, but it was a freedom she had to fight for every single day. The challenges shifted from the overt political control of a communist state to the subtle yet powerful barriers of academic hierarchy and scientific dogma. Her story reveals that even in the most open societies, revolutionary ideas must often survive a long winter of skepticism before they can finally bloom and bear fruit. The breakthrough, when it came, was quiet but monumental. Working alongside immunologist Drew Weissman at the University of Pennsylvania, Katalin discovered a way to modify mRNA so it could be slipped into the body without triggering a destructive inflammatory response. And this was the key that unlocked the full potential of mRNA technology, transforming it from a scientific curiosity into a powerful platform for vaccines and therapeutics. Their foundational work, published in 2005, was the culmination of years of thankless effort. It laid the essential groundwork for the rapid development of the PfizerBioNTech and Moderna COVID-19 vaccines, technologies that would go on to save millions of lives during a global pandemic. Katalin Karikó's story is a powerful reminder that great discoveries often depend on the courage to cross borders, both geographical and intellectual. Migration, though fraught with difficulty, can be a vital catalyst for scientific progress. It allows brilliant minds to escape the confines of closed systems and brings new perspectives to welcoming nations. The circulation of talent and ideas is the lifeblood of innovation. The United States, in particular, has long benefited from its ability to attract scientists like Karikó, whose contributions have propelled the nation to the forefront of global research. Her journey from a marginalized immigrant to a Nobel Prize laureate underscores the immense value of embracing outsider perspectives. In the end, the teddy bear did more than carry a family's savings across a border. It carried the seed of a scientific revolution that would reshape modern medicine. Katalin Karikó's Odyssey teaches us that progress is not inevitable. It is earned through sacrifice, resilience, and an unyielding belief in the power of a single idea. It proves that the pursuit of knowledge requires not only intellectual freedom, but also immense personal courage. The path to discovery is often lonely and uncertain, but for those brave enough to walk it, the destination can change the world for everyone.
Science is often seen as a world of pure discovery. We imagine clean laboratories, brilliant minds, and the noble search for truth. This picture suggests that scientists are free to follow their curiosity wherever it leads. It implies a system built on merit, where the best ideas are nurtured and supported. People believe that in the world of research, data is the only thing that matters. But this vision is often a beautiful illusion. The reality of academic life can be far different. It is a human system, filled with the same flaws found everywhere else. Jealousy, power struggles, and crushing hierarchies that can stifle innovation before it even has a chance to breathe. The structure of academia is not always kind to the people who work within it. It is a pyramid, with a few powerful professors at the top and many others working below them. These lower-ranked scientists, like postdoctoral fellows and junior researchers, depend on their superiors for everything. They need them for funding, for lab space, and for the recommendations that will shape their entire careers. This creates a dangerous power imbalance. A single person's opinion can determine whether a young scientist succeeds or fails. This system does not guarantee fairness. It can, in fact, become a place where personal grudges and biases destroy promising work and discard talented people. This environment is especially difficult for those who are seen as outsiders. Immigrant scientists, women and researchers pursuing unpopular ideas often face the greatest resistance. They must work harder just to be seen as equals. Their passion and dedication are not always enough to protect them. The very freedom that academia promises can be taken away by a supervisor who feels threatened or a grant review committee that lacks vision. The system is designed to reward safe, predictable research. It is not built to support the kind of risky, groundbreaking work that leads to true breakthroughs. This is the world Katalin Karikó entered, a world that was not ready for her. Freedom in science is not a given, it is earned, and sometimes it is fought for against incredible odds. It is not simply the freedom to have an idea, it is the freedom to test that idea, to secure funding for it, and to publish the results without fear of professional ruin. For many, this freedom remains just out of reach. Their careers are spent navigating a complex maze of institutional politics and personal conflicts. They learn quickly that a brilliant hypothesis is worthless without the resources to prove it. The story of science is not just one of eureka moments. It is also a story of quiet battles fought in hallways, offices, and grant applications. In 1985, Katalin Karikó, her husband, and their young daughter left communist Hungary for a new life in the United States. They were chasing a dream of scientific freedom. They sold their car on the black market and sewed the money, about $1,200, into their daughter's teddy bear. This was not just a move, it was a leap of faith into the unknown. Karikó had accepted a postdoctoral position at Temple University in Philadelphia. She arrived with immense hope, believing she had left behind a restrictive system for one that would embrace her ambitious ideas about messenger, RNA, or mRNA. She was ready to work, to contribute, and to build a future for her family. The early days were a struggle, as they are for most immigrants. Karikó had to adapt to a new culture, a new language, and a new scientific community. Her position was temporary, and her visa was tied directly to her job. This created a constant feeling of insecurity. Losing her job didn't just mean a professional setback, it meant her family might have to leave the country. This pressure hangs over many immigrant scientists. They must prove their worth constantly, not just to their supervisors, but to a system that can send them home if their funding runs out. Karikó poured all her energy into her work, driven by both her passion for mRNA and the urgent need to secure her place. Her supervisor at Temple University held immense power over her career and her family's future. This is a common dynamic in academia, but it is magnified for an immigrant researcher. Karikó soon learned how fragile her position was. When she received a promising job offer from Johns Hopkins University, it should have been a moment of celebration. It was a step up, a chance for more stability and better resources. Instead, it triggered a crisis. Her supervisor did not want to lose her. He saw her success as a threat to his own laboratory. He was not happy for her. He was angry that she was trying to leave. Instead of supporting her career advancement, her boss decided to destroy it. He threatened to have her deported. He called the new institution and spread lies, claiming she was a difficult and unreliable scientist. Because of his position of authority, his words carried weight. The job offer at Johns Hopkins was withdrawn. Just like that, Karikó's dream was crushed by the jealousy of one powerful man. This single act of sabotage revealed the dark side of academia. It showed her that in this new world, just like the old one, freedom was not guaranteed. Her talent and hard work had been nullified by a cruel abuse of power. After the devastating experience at Temple University, Karikó eventually found a new position as a research assistant professor at the University of Pennsylvania. It was a step down in some ways, a non-tenure track role that offered little security, but it allowed her to continue her work. Here, she dedicated herself completely to the idea that had captivated her for years, using synthetic mRNA to instruct cells to make their own medicines. At the time, this was a radical concept. The scientific community was deeply skeptical. mRNA was considered too unstable and too likely to provoke a dangerous immune response. It was seen as a scientific dead end. Karikó, however, saw its immense potential. She spent her days and nights in the lab, trying to solve the puzzle of how to make mRNA work. But her vision was not shared by those who held the purse strings. She wrote grant proposal after grant proposal, outlining her ideas and presenting her preliminary data. Each one came back with the same answer: rejected. The grant review committees, the gatekeepers of scientific funding, did not believe in her project. They called it media group of scientists in grant review meeting, committee reviewing documents, grant proposal with critical notes a stock I distribute, equally. Too risky, too ambitious, and not significant enough to fund. Without grants, she could not run a lab, hire assistants, or even pay her own salary. This constant rejection was more than just a professional problem, it was a personal blow. It was the system telling her, over and over again, that her life's work was worthless. Her colleagues, who were working on more conventional projects, were getting funded and promoted. She, meanwhile, was seen as an outsider chasing an impossible dream. The university's support began to fade. Without grant money coming in, She was viewed as a liability rather than an asset. The academic world runs on funding, and a scientist who cannot secure it is often seen as a failure, regardless of the brilliance of their ideas. The breaking point came in 1995. After years of failed grant applications, the university delivered a final crushing ultimatum. Her superiors told her that her focus on mRNA was not leading anywhere. Because she was not bringing in any funding, they could no longer justify her position as a faculty member. They demoted her. She was removed from the tenure track and given a lower status, lower paid role as a senior research investigator. It was a profound humiliation. The institution she had dedicated herself to was essentially telling her to give up. For anyone else, this might have been the end of the road. The demotion at the University of Pennsylvania was a moment of deep professional and personal crisis for Katalin Karikó. She was left feeling isolated and defeated. The academic system she had placed her faith in had officially cast her aside. Her salary was cut, and her path to a stable, respected career seemed to be permanently blocked. In the competitive world of science, a demotion is a clear signal of failure. Many of her colleagues looked down on her, whispering that her stubborn pursuit of mRNA had ruined her career. It was a lonely time, filled with doubt and the constant worry of financial instability. Adding to this immense pressure, Karikó was also an immigrant woman in a field dominated by American-born men. She did not have the same networks of support that many of her peers took for granted. She spoke with an accent and came from a different cultural background, which made her feel like even more of an outsider. The casual sexism and xenophobia that can exist in academic departments made her isolation even more acute. She had to fight not only for her science, but for her very right to be heard and respected in a system that was not built for someone like her. Just as she was grappling with these professional and social challenges, she faced a new, terrifying battle. Karikó was diagnosed with cancer. At the same time, her career seemed to be falling apart. Her health was now also at risk. The combination of a serious illness, a demotion, and the relentless stress of her work would have been enough to make almost anyone quit. It felt as if the universe was telling her to stop. She had every reason to walk away from the lab, to abandon the mRNA research that had brought her so much hardship, and to focus on her health and her family. But Katalin Karikó did not quit. Her resilience was extraordinary. She continued her cancer treatments while still going to the lab whenever she could. The thought of giving up on her work was more painful than the thought of continuing against all odds. Her belief in the potential of mRNA was absolute. It was not just a job. It was her life's purpose. She decided that if she was going to be demoted and ignored, she would at least continue the work that she believed in. This quiet, stubborn determination, forged in the face of rejection, illness, and isolation, would become her greatest strength. Even after her demotion, Karikó continued her work in the shadows of the university. She found a new collaborator in Drew Weissman, an immunologist who was also at the University of Pennsylvania. He was interested in developing a vaccine for HIV and saw potential in her mRNA technology. Together, they began to tackle the central problem that had plagued her research for years, the fact that synthetic mRNA caused a massive, dangerous inflammatory response when injected. Everyone else saw this as an insurmountable obstacle. Karikó and Weissman saw it as a puzzle that needed to be solved. They believed the answer was hidden within the mRNA molecule itself. They worked tirelessly, often with minimal resources and little institutional encouragement. Their persistence finally paid off. They discovered that by making a small chemical modification to one of the building blocks of mRNA, a nucleoside called uridine, they could make the molecule invisible to the body's immune sensors. This was the breakthrough. This simple change allowed the mRNA to slip past the body's defenses, enter cells, and deliver its instructions without triggering a harmful inflammatory reaction. It was the key that unlocked the entire field of mRNA therapeutics. The idea that had been rejected for decades was suddenly viable. When they published their findings in 2005, the scientific world barely noticed. The paper received little attention. The years of being ignored had conditioned Karikó not to expect fanfare. She and Weissman continued their research, refining the technology and demonstrating its potential. They licensed their discovery to a small company, but for years, it remained a niche area of science. The academic system that had once scorned her work was slow to recognize its monumental importance. The breakthrough had happened, but its impact was still a quiet ripple, not yet the tidal wave it would become. Decades of struggle, rejection, and personal hardship had led to this moment. Karikó's story is a powerful reminder of the flaws within the academic world. Her journey shows how easily talent can be overlooked and how groundbreaking ideas can be crushed by rigid, risk-averse systems. Yet, it is also a story of hope. It proves that perseverance, driven by an unshakable belief in an idea, can ultimately triumph. The very environment that tried to break her became the place where she made one of the most important discoveries of our time. A discovery that would later save millions of lives through the COVID-19 vaccines. True breakthroughs can and do emerge, sometimes not because of the system, but in spite of it. By the mid-1990s, Katalin Karikó had lost her position on the academic fast track, but she had not lost her scientific focus. While many researchers move with the current, she chose to move against it. Her attention was fixed on a molecule most of the scientific community had already abandoned: messenger ribonucleic acid, or mRNA. At its core, mRNA is the instruction manual of life. It carries genetic information from deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA, to the cell's protein-making machinery. Without it, cells cannot function. The concept was simple in theory, but honestly, deeply problematic in practice. In the 1990s, mRNA was widely considered unsuitable for therapeutic use. It was unstable, easily degraded, and when introduced into the body, it triggered strong immune reactions that made it unsafe. Because of these limitations, funding agencies, pharmaceutical companies, and even fellow scientists, well, they lost interest in the field. mRNA became labeled as a scientific dead end. But Katalin Karikó saw something others did not. She believed that if mRNA could be delivered safely, and if its interaction with the immune system could be controlled, it could instruct cells to produce therapeutic proteins inside the body itself. In other words, instead of injecting drugs, the body could be taught to make its own medicine. This idea was revolutionary, and that was precisely the problem. Scientific revolutions rarely receive immediate support. They arrive too early, challenging existing assumptions, methods, and investments. Her grant proposals were rejected again and again. Reviewers questioned the feasibility. Funding panels doubted the practicality. The field, they said, was no longer relevant. Yet relevance is not the same as truth. Working with limited resources, often without stable institutional backing, Katalin continued her research quietly. She refined techniques, she tested hypotheses, she endured skepticism not with argument, but with persistence. This period of her career highlights a fundamental tension in science, the conflict between exploratory research and risk-averse funding systems. mRNA research demanded patience, long-term thinking, and, honestly, a real tolerance for uncertainty, qualities that, modern scientific structures often struggle to support. But history has shown us time and again that ideas ahead of their time do not just disappear. They wait, and in Katalin Karikó's case, this waiting would soon be interrupted by an unexpected collaboration, a moment that would really transform mRNA from an academic curiosity into one of the most powerful tools in modern medicine. Because sometimes, the difference between failure and transformation is not the idea itself, but the arrival of the right partner at the right moment, and that moment was honestly approaching. Scientific breakthroughs don't always come with fireworks or front-page headlines. Sometimes the ideas that change the world arrive quietly, almost like they're waiting for the right moment to be noticed. Take the story of Katalin Karikó. For years, she worked in the shadows, underfunded, overlooked, and often dismissed by her peers. But one day, in the most ordinary of places, a university hallway, near a photocopy machine, she bumped into Drew Weissman, an immunologist who it turned out was wrestling with a problem she'd been thinking about for years. Now Karikó was obsessed with mRNA, this fragile little molecule that carries instructions from DNA. She dreamed of using it to treat diseases. But there was a massive roadblock. Every time scientists tried to introduce synthetic mRNA into the body, the immune system freaked out. It attacked the mRNA as if it were an invader, shutting down protein production and causing inflammation. Here's where it gets interesting. Weissman, with his deep understanding of the immune system, and Karikó realized they might be able to trick the body. They found that by swapping out one tiny part of the mRNA, replacing a building block called uridine with a natural cousin, pseudo-uridine, they could sneak the mRNA past the immune system's defenses. No more flare-ups. Suddenly, the mRNA was stable, invisible to the immune sentries, and could actually do its job. In 2005, they published their findings in a journal called Immunity. This wasn't just a technical tweak, it was a game changer. They'd unlocked a new way for mRNA to work inside the body. But here's the twist. Nobody cared. Nature, Science, those big journals. They rejected the paper. The scientific establishment just wasn't ready to accept that mRNA could ever be useful as a therapy. It's a pattern we see over and over in science. The biggest discoveries are often the ones the world isn't ready for. The evidence was solid, the data convincing, but the idea, it was too new, too bold. So the paper sat there, quietly gathering dust, cited by a handful of experts, but ignored by most. Yet within those overlooked pages was the blueprint for something extraordinary, a technology that would, in time, change medicine forever. Because science doesn't care about trends or popularity. It moves forward because of truth. And when the world finally faces a challenge that only that truth can solve, well, the quiet discoveries finally get their turn in the spotlight. Stick around, because next time, we'll see how this forgotten breakthrough became one of humanity's greatest tools in the fight against a global crisis. For years, the discovery remained in the shadows. The paper existed, the mechanism was proven, the potential was extraordinary, but science, unlike emergencies, often moves slowly. After decades of working at the edges of academia, without recognition or institutional security, Katalin Karikó reached a difficult conclusion. Her ideas would not fully mature within the environment she was in, so she made another pivotal decision. She left academia. In 2013, Karikó joined a small biotechnology company in Germany, BioNTech. There, for the first time, mRNA was not treated as an outdated curiosity, but as a platform technology with vast potential. At BioNTech, the conditions were different. The focus was not on trends, but on translation, turning foundational science into real-world solutions. The modified mRNA technology, which was once ignored by the academic mainstream, began to take shape as a powerful medical tool. And then, the world changed. A novel coronavirus began spreading rapidly across the globe. Healthcare systems were overwhelmed. Time became the most precious resource. Traditional vaccine platforms, requiring years of development, were just not fast enough. Suddenly, the qualities that once made mRNA unpopular, its flexibility, its speed, its adaptability became its greatest strengths. Using the foundational work developed by Karikó and Weissman, companies like BioNTech, Pfizer, and Moderna were able to design vaccines in record time. The same mRNA, once dismissed as unstable, now delivered precise instructions to human cells, teaching them to produce harmless viral proteins that trained the immune system to respond. Within months, effective vaccines were deployed worldwide, millions of lives were saved, hospitals stabilized, mortality rates declined. And a technology once confined to the margins of science became the frontline defense of humanity. What decades of skepticism could not achieve, global necessity did. This moment reshaped modern medicine. It validated not only a technology, but a philosophy of science, one that values long-term thinking, fundamental research, and ideas that may seem impractical until the world desperately needs them. The science did not change overnight, the world's perception of it did, and in that shift, the true power of ignored knowledge was finally revealed. But recognition, when it comes, often arrives late. And as we will see next, the final chapter of this story is not just about success, it is about justice, acknowledgement, and the meaning of perseverance in science.
You know, sometimes the world is slow to catch up with genius. For Katalin Karikó, recognition didn't come quickly or easily. It took more than 40 years of relentless work, countless rejections, and a quiet, unshakable belief in her science. In 2023, the Nobel Prize in Medicine finally landed in her hands, alongside Drew Weissman, for the breakthroughs behind mRNA vaccines. But this award, it was so much bigger than a personal win. It was a long overdue correction. A correction for decades of skepticism, closed doors, and a system that told her, again and again, that her research just wasn't worth it. By then, she'd already won over 130 other awards and become a symbol for every scientist whose ideas were met with silence instead of applause. Karikó's story is for anyone who's ever been told their work doesn't matter, for researchers working in obscurity, and for those whose ideas aren't trendy enough to fund. The Nobel didn't suddenly make her science important. The work had always been world-changing. What the prize did was change the story. It reminded all of us, big ideas often arrive quietly, sometimes decades before the world is ready for them. So, ask yourself, how many vital discoveries are we ignoring right now because they don't fit the mold? Real scientific progress takes more than brilliance. It takes patience, courage, and the willingness to listen before a crisis forces us to pay attention. If you're with me and you care about science that sees beyond the headlines, hit subscribe. Here, we follow the evidence and the ideas that endure. Because the discoveries that last aren't always the ones that arrive first. They're the ones that survive.
Conclusion of this remarkable journey, I want to take a moment to express my deepest gratitude. First, to Professor Dr. Meher Alqadi, Professor Research Scientist at the University of California, Los Angeles, and Chief Science and Technology Officer at Nanotech Energy, for highlighting the extraordinary story of perseverance and discovery. His article not only brought Katalin Karikó's path to life, but also reminded us of the profound value of persistence in the face of overwhelming obstacles. Science is rarely easy. It is often demanding, uncertain, and unforgiving. Yet, it is the unwavering determination of individuals like Katalin Karikó that transforms knowledge into solutions that save lives. Her story is a testament to resilience, vision, and the courage to continue working, even when the world doubts your path. I also want to extend my heartfelt thanks to you, our audience. Your curiosity, support, and engagement keep this channel alive. For those watching, please take a moment to comment below, share your thoughts, your reflections, or even your own experiences of persistence in science or life. Your voice matters here, and together we celebrate knowledge that goes beyond trends, beyond obstacles, and beyond time. On behalf of myself, Professor Dr. Salah Lotfy, Professor at the Egyptian Atomic Energy Authority, thank you for joining us on this journey. Remember, science thrives when we nurture it with patience, integrity, and courage. Don't forget to subscribe to For Science Salah Lotfy channel to continue exploring stories that inspire, educate, and illuminate the incredible human pursuit of knowledge. Because the path to discovery may be long, but perseverance turns even the smallest idea into a force capable of changing the world.